Coming up next, a sit down with one of my favorite artists ever. It's about one of the best songs of the mid-'80s. I swear, I've never met anyone who does not love this guy and his music. Now, it turns out he was writing a fun little song about leaving rebellion behind to conform to a more traditional lifestyle. Not selling out, but buying in. And then years later, this happy-go-lucky 80s classic was stolen by a notorious serial killer. Then on another hit from this same record, everybody was in awe with the amazing backing vocals. And come to find out, it was the offensive line and a quarterback from an NFL team. Now, for about 5 years in the 80s, this guy and his band were as big as anybody in music. They were right there with Michael Jackson, Madonna, Prince, Duran Duran, The Police, and they were just a bunch of regular guys. I mean, they had 11 top 10 hits in just 4 years. But then everything changed. And because of a horrible disease, they haven't been able to tour for many years. But in the end, they're still the only news source I trust. Find out why coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you'd rather listen to Huey Lewis and the news than the actual news, you're going to dig this channel. That's what we do here. Make sure to subscribe below to get our latest interviews and videos. By the way, we're trying to put together a big round of interviews in various locations across the U.S. Best way that we can do that is through your support on Patreon below. This is all for this channel to keep the music alive. You get more content and you can help us curate this rock history. So it's time for another edition from our series Revelations. This is where legendary artists take us for a deep dive into their best songs, and you get insight that only insiders get. Today, we're going to step into the year 1986, where a man named Huey Lewis and his band of brothers named The News were about to follow up their first #1 hit, The Power of Love. I mean, really, you think about it. From 1984 to 1987, Huey Lewis was one of the biggest stars on the planet in music. I mean, Sports was one of the biggest records of music's best year, 1984. It went to #1, supported by so many hits. I mean, I Want a New Drug, The Heart of Rock and Roll, Heart and Soul, and If This Is It, all hitting the top 10 with iconic videos that took over MTV. I want a new drug. They say the heart of rock and roll is still beating, 'cause she's heart and soul. And then in '85, they had two brilliant songs that supported the pop culture phenomenon known as Back to the Future in The Power of Love and Back in Time. And then in 1986, they released 4 that in some respects was even bigger than Sports, containing 5 top 10 hits, including the #1 hits Jacob's Ladder and Stuck With You. Doing It All for My Baby, I Know What I Like, and today's song feature, Hip to Be Square, also hit the top 10. Hip to be square. It's hip to be square. Hip to Be Square barely missed #1. It was held out of the top 2 spots by 2 songs, Bon Jovi's You Give Love a Bad Name, and Peter Cetera's duet with Amy Grant, The Next Time I Fall, which reigned at numero uno in early December of 1986. But Huey Lewis and his news would actually have the last laugh, as Hip to Be Square would have a huge resurgence in the 21st century after being prominently featured in the 2000 cult film classic American Psycho, starring Christian Bale as notorious serial killer Patrick Bateman. Such a quotable line. You like Huey Lewis and the news?
You like Huey Lewis and the news?
The answer to that question is a resounding yes. I think I've mentioned this before. I've never met someone who doesn't like Huey Lewis and the news. Never. I'm sure some haters are going to jump into the comment section to dispute this and say, oh, I don't like him. But let's face it, Huey Lewis and his news are as likable as there are in music. When I interviewed Huey It was one of my favorite interviews. I know I say that about a lot of the interviews. But, you know, he was so down to earth. Great storyteller to boot. This guy, he's just got it. He was very kind to invite me and my wife to a show and then backstage after where we just geeked out on music. It was a great hang. It wasn't long after that when Huey was forced to walk away from touring due to Meniere's disease. Really grateful I was able to see Huey live several times. Amazing live. I remember my dad bought the cassette of 4, and I bought the record. I remember it came out on August 20th, about a week after my birthday, and I was so pumped. We listened to it in his truck, my dad and I, and then I listened to it on my turntable in my room, nonstop. Also recall the music videos on MTV. It's just a great time to be alive. I was just talking to my son about this the other day, explaining how streaming and some technologies actually ruined adventure. I try to keep it positive here on this channel, but there's nothing adventurous or exciting about digital music outside of convenience. You want a song? I mean, you have it. There's no waiting, there's no wishing, there's no savoring anymore. I mean, I remember being so excited for a new Huey record after Sports and Back to the Future. I read about its possible release in some music magazines about a year before, 6 months before. I heard about it on the radio. It'd be coming out in the summer. Then I heard the first song on the radio. I was counting down the days for this album to drop, which was the way it was for so many artists and albums back in the day for us. I mean, you really work for it. And then when you finally got your hands on an album that you were waiting for, it just meant something. It had a real value. You savored every song. You looked through the liner notes, the album cover. You speculated with your friends about the band or the song. Since there was no internet, there was a lot of mystery there. The cover of Huey Lewis 4, classic Huey Lewis, after Sports, to have another one-word album title with a golf reference is just par for the course. That's a lot of golf references. On the cover, the wall that Huey and the News stand against, it's actually a wall from some of the band members' former high school in Mill Valley, California. I believe it was Sean Hopper, Bill Gibson, and Mario Cipollina. They all went to school together back in the day, and they took it there. Hip to Be Square was the second single release from the album after Stuck With You went to #1. And it was the streak that continued with Jacob's Ladder of 4 consecutive top 3 hits for Huey and the band, including 3 of 4 of those going to #1. So let's get into it.
You like Huey Lewis and the News?
They're okay.
For my money, if not the best rock song of the 80s, one of the best rock songs. I mean, it's just got so much energy from the drum hit, #3 on the pop charts, #1 on the rock charts. You had a lot of #1 songs on the rock chart. I don't know if you realize how many songs. You had a lot of #1 songs on there. But the song...
Well, there's every song's #1 on some chart. There's always,
right.
You can always find a chart that you're #1 on.
That song is connected, of course, to American Psycho and all that kind of stuff. And it felt like to me that you guys were poking fun at your image a little bit with that song.
Yeah, but the song was meant to articulate an 80s phenomenon that the David Brooks's book, Bobos in Paradise, articulated. People... bourgeois bohemians, bobos, bourgeois bohemians, people who grew up in Bohemia in the 60s, if you will, Bohemia, but it got too scary for them. And now they're older and they're dropping back in, cutting their hair and they're exercising and they're blah, blah, blah. It's hip to be square. It's hip to be square. That was the idea. And I originally wrote it in the third person. He used to be a renegade. He used to fool around.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be even funnier if I told on myself, because we were all going through that. And unfortunately, a certain number of people didn't really get the joke and thought it was this anthem for square people, which I never intended it to be. But several very important people did get it in a real profound way. One of them was Luther Vandross, who contacted me about who'd had a relative who'd had real bad drug problems, and Hip to Be Square was kind of a message there for this kid and all that sort of stuff, which is pretty cool. You know, it is what it is. These songs, you can only birth them, then they become these other things based on the times and the people and all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, of course, Bret Easton, and it's kind of tied.
And that's kind of a funny thing. That was we'd read the book, and I read his critique of our band and all that, and he had it just about right. I mean, he clearly was a fan and knew what he was talking about. Not only about us, but also Phil Collins and Tina Turner
and Whitney Houston.
And Whitney, I meant Whitney,
Whitney Houston.
Big fan and really had a very good knowledge of
and that
what was
scene
going on.
in the movie is so great.
Right.
I think their undisputed masterpiece is Hip to Be Square. A song so catchy.
So now they're going to make a film, and they asked us, would we, the song, of course, lent the song to the film. They paid us for it. And now, on the eve of the release of the premiere, like a week out, they say, how would you like to, we want to do a soundtrack. Well, again, the soundtrack was going to be our song. I think it's a Phil Collins song. And a bunch of source music. And mindful of our
experience of Back to the Future.
Said, well, we don't want our fans to have to buy this record for one song. What else is on there? Not much, says my manager. I said, well, do we have to do it? He says, no. Politely decline. Thanks, boom, no. Well, now they come out with a press release the day before the movie comes out that says Huey Lewis has seen the film, and it's so violent that he's pulled the tune from the sound, all of which was fabricated. And, you know, kind of pissed me off a little bit. So I had to kind of boycott the film till we did our lampoon.
Well, that was great because you got a little bit of revenge there on that.
I think it's an undisputed masterpiece. A movie so entertaining, most people probably don't listen to the message.
And, you know, they did the musical after the film.
American Psycho?
Yeah, which I saw in New York. And they used the song to close the first act. And they do the scene, and they play the song, and it's fantastic. The musical's fantastic, I think. And that's a feat. How do you make a musical out of
American Psycho?
Well, they did, and it's really good.
Some of the lyrics in there, I love the second verse. I like my bands in business suits. I watch them on TV. Again, another great example of syncopating those lyrics so perfectly, because your energy on that vocal, and then Johnny's solo on that. Oh my gosh. The drum sound on that too. Where did that come from? Because that's got an incredible drum sound.
Well, that's kind of, you know, it's aided. Where it's sampled a little bit. So the kick and snare is sampled a little bit. Clear Mountain mixed that. It mixes all our records.
Oh, yeah.
And that one, see, that was kind of very, that was assembled a little bit. That were played to a track there and all that kind of stuff. That was locked in pretty good.
And then the 49ers on background vocals.
Yeah, here, there, and everywhere. Joe Montana,
Ronnie Lott,
Dwight Clark, Ronnie Lott, and Ricky Ellison.
I love it.
And curiously enough, that's the first song that they sang. Let me get this right. Was it? Yeah. And so now we put them on I Know What I Like. And they're great on that. So now on the next album, when we're doing a couple days off, it would be great to have them on that. Well, we can't because they're in camp or wherever they are. So we'll do it ourselves. And we went out there and tried, 3 or 4 of us, a bunch of people, and tracked it up and stacked it, but it sounded like a bunch of little high school kids. 4 49ers sounds like 25 of us, you know, because they have these big.
Oh yeah,
so we went up to the 49er camp and sampled them, going couple days off, and then put that.
And that
on.
was it. Sesame Street too. Hip to Be Square was covered on
Hip
Sesame
to Be a
Street.
Square.
It's hip to be a square.
It's pop music, it's popular music. So you got to. It's relatable. It's a communication. It's you know, it's a messagey kind of a communication thing. Popular music. What you're trying to do really is reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's exactly what you're trying to do. It's a haiku, this thing, pop music. And now we're trying to do that for people our age. And that's a tough thing to do because we're not as interesting as we once were, you know, and there's not as much going on. But
I read somewhere you said nobody cares what a 60-year-old has to say. I don't think that's true.
Well, that may not be true. But we're trying. But the idea is that you know songs need to be about something. That's what we're trying to do. popular music that's not just talked down, that's smart enough to be clever enough to be entertaining and have food for thought a little bit is the idea,
Huey Lewis and the News released a new album a while back. It's called Weather. It's got that good old classic sound. I'll link to it below so that you can listen. Make sure that you leave us a comment about this catchy slice of 80s rock and pop. What are your memories of this song and Huey's #1 album 4? What do you say about the way it was used in American Psycho? I thought it was pretty brilliant what he says about it. And about music and then and now and how we used to savor the music. Let's have a good discussion. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below. We'd love to have you as part of our family here that keeps the music alive. Patreon, merch, whatever you can do that helps us to keep this going. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.